Welcome everyone to day 3 of the Climate Action and Agriculture Symposium. Glad you are here. I'm going to go over some of the meeting logistics as we get started here. So how you can participate today, again, if you have questions for any of the speakers, go ahead and post them in the chat. We'll copy and proctor them during the designated Q&A session. We'll keep track of it so that the speakers don't have to, no problem. Just make sure it'll be very helpful if it's for a particular speaker, you put the speaker's name. That helps us so we know who to address it to when it's time for Q&A. If you have comments, you can also use the chat for comments. You can use the reaction button that's at the bottom of your Zoom ribbon bar, however you would like to interact with this meeting. If you need assistance, there's 2 of us here with the label PSU support. You can chat us, say, hey, I'm having trouble, or I can't hear, or you need some technical assistance. We're here to help. So continuing education, we have 2 different types today. Certified crop advisor again. We have 1 hour of nutrient management today. We'll put up a QR code at the end of the presentation so that you can scan with your CCA app. So make sure you're logged in the whole time so that you can scan. If you don't have the app, you could always email me with your CCA number at anrprogramsupport@ucanr.edu. We also have San Diego Region Irrigated Lands Group. Remain logged in and engaged in the meeting for the duration of the event, and then we'll take an attendee list and we'll submit the hours on your behalf. So if you have any questions, you can, again, email ANR Program Support and we'll help you out. So now that's it for logistics. I'm going to turn it over to Jan.
Thank you, Kelly. Yes, my name is Jan Gonzalez. If this is the first time you've been joining us for this week-long event, I'm a program coordinator, community education specialist with the University of California Cooperative Extension in the San Diego County office. I am currently managing the Climate Resilient Agriculture Program, which is made possible with support from the County of San Diego's Climate Action Plan programming. I would like to thank everyone for being here. I especially want to also thank Kelly and Quinn with our program support unit for handling all the logistics in the background all week long. And we've got a very full schedule today. I went ahead and put the link to the speakers' bios and the agenda in the chat room. If you want to refer to those, I'll just introduce presenters by name rather than reading their full-on professional biography to save time. And we'll also, today, for the first time, we'll have some time towards the end of the session for some small group discussion time. And we will be talking about our challenges, issues, concerns, questions regarding water quality issues and nitrogen management issues. So you can plan on that later on about 4 o'clock. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our first presenter. Jason DuMond is an environmental scientist with the Commercial Agriculture Program with the San Diego Water Board. And he'll be giving us an update on the Water Board Agricultural Program. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you. Let me share my screen real quick.
Hello, my name is Jason DuMond and I'm an environmental scientist in the Commercial Agricultural Program at the San Diego Water Board. Today I will be discussing the requirements of the presidential setting Eastern San Joaquin Order and how it will affect the next iteration of the San Diego Water Board's General Order for Commercial Agricultural Operations. So first, some background information about the Eastern San Joaquin Order. In 2012, the Eastern San Joaquin River Order was adopted by the Central Valley Regional Board. The order was subsequently petitioned to State Board, and in 2018, the State Board made a determination to uphold the requirements of the Eastern San Joaquin Order. So why is this relevant to the San Diego region? The decision to uphold the requirements means that all regions in the state must enforce the requirements of the Eastern San Joaquin Order. This order requires growers to record the amount of nitrogen applied and lost crop harvests, and also to begin the process of minimizing the impacts to beneficial uses of surface and groundwater. Recent studies in the state of California have shown that About 43,000 wells analyzed for nitrates since the year 2000 have about 6,000 of those total wells, or about 13.6%, have exceedances of the maximum contaminant level for nitrate in that water. And also about 12,000 of those wells, or 26.7%, are on the verge of reaching those maximum contaminant levels for nitrates. This is concerning because nitrates in drinking water are known to have negative impacts on human health. Such examples include blue baby syndrome in infants, increased heart rate, thyroid disease, and an increased risk of certain types of cancers. This graphic here represents the nitrogen cycle as it is applied to agricultural operations. On the left, you can see the main methods of nitrogen application at agricultural operations. These methods include fertilizer application, irrigation, and anorganic amendments, which is what the A stands for, nitrogen applied. The red arrows on the right display the methods in which nitrogen may be removed from soil. As you can see, these methods include the uptake of nitrogen by crops, which is then lost or removed via the harvest, or nitrogen lost to irrigation, soil erosion, and soil percolation or infiltration, which is what the R stands for, nitrogen removed. While the Eastern San Joaquin Order considers all 4 removal pathways, for now the new San Diego Agricultural Order will only focus on the nitrogen removed through harvest. This method allows growers to calculate how much nitrogen is absorbed by the crops. Each specific type of crop has its own R value that would be used in these calculations. These R values come from various nitrogen uptake studies already completed throughout the state of California. At the bottom of this slide, there is a link that you can follow to a website that shows the studies that created these R values for the specific crops in the state of California. This link will also be on the final slide with other information where you can take a screenshot and record that information. This slide shows a graphical representation of the intention of these new requirements in the San Diego region. As growers report nitrogen applied and nitrogen removed values, Water Board staff will evaluate the data to determine which areas within the region have nitrogen applied exceedances of what is necessary for specific crops. Water Board staff would then be able to focus their inspection efforts on those areas where the highest nitrogen exceedances have been reported. Water Board staff will look at these methods by which nitrogen is applied in these areas, as well as the best management practices used to control run-on and prevent runoff to determine if the best management practices are effective, or if the additional or different best management practices are needed to reduce runoff. The new general order will require the direct reporting of nitrogen applied and removed at agricultural operations within the San Diego region. This data will be submitted to the Water Board annually, similar to the current annual growing requirements. Growers enrolled as individuals will collect and report this data on their own. Growers who are members of a third-party group will rely on the third-party group to collect and report this data on their behalf. Data submitted through third-party groups will be submitted anonymously. This means that the Water Board will not be able to identify specific growers who are over-applying nitrogen to their crops. Staff will only know which areas are exceeding water quality objectives. The results of these analyses will result in the development of total maximum daily loads and stricter standards in areas that have high exceedances in the future. The San Diego Water Board will compile this data in the representative areas based on watersheds. Staff will analyze the data to determine where in the region nitrogen is being over-applied to crops and focus inspections within those areas. This data includes the nitrogen applied and nitrogen removed values. With the next revision of the order, growers will also be required to submit an irrigation and nitrogen management plan at the time of their enrollment. Growers who are previously enrolled will also be required to submit these plans within a specific time frame yet to be determined upon adoption of the order. These plans will include best management practices applied on site, irrigation methods, and nitrogen application and sources. Implementation of best management practices will help decrease the total nitrogen present in waterways within the region as a result of runoff from agricultural operations. Irrigation reporting includes stating whether the operation uses drip irrigation or spray irrigation and other irrigation methods. Growers will also need to provide information regarding how much and how often nitrogen is applied to their crops, as I previously mentioned. Individual growers will be responsible for creating these plans on their own, whereas members of a third-party group will be assisted with creating these plans, which is another incentive for growers to join a third-party group. The San Diego Water Board will accept these plans upon submittal if they meet all the requirements. So what will we use this data for? We will evaluate nitrogen applied and removed ratios to determine what areas in our region have the highest nitrogen applied exceedances. We will use this to focus our inspections in the hardest hit areas within our region and encourage growers to install more effective pest management practices on their site to reduce nutrient and sediment runoff. As these ratios are evaluated over time, the San Diego Water Board will have a better understanding of what pest management practices are the most effective in preventing nutrient and sediment runoff. The ratio values will also be used to develop future target values for applied nitrogen to each type of crop in our region. So all of these new reporting requirements will be required with the next iteration of the ag order. Workshops and stakeholder meetings will be taking place at the end of 2021 or early 22, where growers can come in and give us their thoughts about these new requirements. The San Diego Water Board is working with the intention of bringing a new general order for agriculture operations to the board for consideration of adoption during the year 2023. For anyone who is interested in receiving regular updates of the ag order or interested in attending public workshops, they may sign up for our email chain provided on this slide with more information, and it will be provided on the next slide. And feel free to take a screenshot or just pause the video here and take down all of this information. I will go over this now. My contact information is provided in the top left. Feel free to reach out to me for any information applicable to the San Diego region. If you would like more information regarding the new requirements of the Eastern San Joaquin Order, please contact Ms. Kelsey Moore or Brianna St. Pierre with the State Water Board. For more information on how to enroll with a third-party group, I provided our third-party group's contact information on the right side of the screen. I recommend calling all three to see which group is best suited for your needs before enrolling with one of them. And finally, I provided the link to the R value studies on the top there, and then the email or the link to sign up for our email list for any information regarding our agricultural order. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay, great. Thank you. So Bruno Pitton, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, is a staff
That's
research
correct.
associate with the plant sciences, environmental horticulture and ornamentals group at UC Davis, and he's going to share with us, talk to us about nitrogen balancing for nursery container plant production. Right. Thank you, Jason, or Bruno, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yeah, as Jan introduced me, I'm Bruno Pitton. I work in the Department of Plant Sciences. I work with Lauren Oakey at UC Davis, and I've been doing a lot of work on this, on nitrogen fate and balancing in nurseries. And it's unfortunate that Jason was cut off because he actually did a great introduction on what kind of implemented or why I initiated some of this work. And so, as he talked about a little bit already, is nitrogen fates. Why are they important? So some fates are bad. Nitrate leaching into groundwater and surface water. And that Jason did a great job of explaining much more thoroughly than I was planning to, but essentially it contaminates groundwater and makes it not safe for humans to drink. Another thing I've been looking at is nitrous oxide, which is a very potent greenhouse gas. It's actually 300 times more potent than CO2, and the majority of it is from nitrogen fertilizers in agriculture. And then this nitrate leaching actually, some of these problems that we became aware of resulted in implementation of the first version of the nitrogen management plan. I think that was like 2016, 2017. And then as Jason spoke about the irrigation and nitrogen management plan, which I have not been keeping up with the order for what growers need to do, but that's the next generation. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that, but that's one of the reasons I initiated this work. And then the other thing is, bait's important too, because in nursery production, we use a lot of fertilizer and it's not cheap. And we also use some more advanced fertilizers like controlled release fertilizers, which are more expensive than soluble fertilizers typically. And so if we can figure out where those the nitrogen is going and optimize our use of it, we can hopefully save some money. So I'm briefly talking about nitrogen management plans. So the original one was actually to document the nitrogen amounts in the applied, and then as Jason said in that great graphic, and then what was removed in harvest. And the difference in that, what we couldn't account for was potentially leachable nitrogen. And so some of the problems with nursery production and using that is that we have a very diverse, group of crops. So how do we know how much is actually removed? Another thing is that we actually have, we ship off our growing media with the plant, which might have a lot of fertilizer in it, especially if it's a controlled release product. And so that's not being accounted for. And then the literature also shows that high amounts of our applied nitrogen is lost to denitrification. And the end product of that is dinitrogen N2 gas, which makes up 80% of our atmosphere, and is completely benign, non-reactive. And then, so in an effort to answer some of these questions, I developed a system nitrogen balance for container plants. So here's what we found using analytical results. This was on a woody ornamental near Sacramento. And so in the plant shoots, 5% of applied nitrogen was at the end of the production cycle was what plants had taken up. And then another 56% remained in the substrate. And so that's roots, what was immobilized in microbial biomass, and then also controlled release fertilizer that was remaining. And it makes sense, right? So we're shipping like 60% of the applied nitrogen off of the nursery, and it's to the retail location. And we want that nitrogen in that substrate, especially as controlled release fertilizer still, so the plants look good until they're sold. And then 6% was in runoff water, which is water that can be recaptured and to be captured and recycled, and we can actually reuse some of that nitrogen. And then this is the number that the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board was really concerned about, was how much was leaching into the soil below the growing beds. And what I found is 3% was leaching, which is a fairly small proportion of applied nitrogen. And then consistent with the literature, about 30% was lost to denitrification. And of that, a total of like 1.5% was lost as N2O, which again is a very potent greenhouse gas. And I'm not going to talk much more about that right now, but that's fairly high compared to soil-based agriculture. And if you have any questions about that, ask me in the Q&A, because I've been doing a lot of research on it lately. So what we found from that research is, well, first of all, our nitrogen use pretty much exceeded plant demand. Only 5% of applied nitrogen was taken up in the roots. And so we could probably do a better job of optimizing that end use to meet plant demand and hopefully, reduce some of our losses. And then in using the nitrogen management plan, the way that it's intended is a large amount of potentially leachable N is there, right? So it would be that what was in the substrate plus the denitrification. So that's like 80% or something. And then, but only 3% of applied N leached into the bed soil if other fates are accounted for. And so this is a fairly small percentage of applied N, as well as coupled with the small footprint of nurseries in California, right? Almonds are like 1 million acres or over, and we're probably closer to 100,000 acres. It's hard to get good estimates, but it's probably not a very significant contribution, unless you're in an area where there's a high concentration of nurseries, like San Diego County. It could be more significant. So one thing that I was very curious about is I saw is the runoff nitrogen and when it was happening. And so on this, you can see we have ammonium, nitrate, and total N. And then this is cumulative nitrogen runoff on the y-axis in grams per acre, and then days after planting on the x-axis. And what I want to draw your attention to is this in the first 6 weeks is the majority of our nitrogen loss into runoff. And so that got me thinking. I was trying to thinking about how we actually incorporate our control release fertilizer, because that's the way this research was done. We had Osmocote Plus incorporated in there, and we use all this mixing equipment. You know, you can see a front loader in the back, plus the mechanical mixing. We also, for planting, we use this equipment that helps facilitate planting. So I set up an experiment to, because I hypothesized that we are damaging a lot of our controlled release fertilizer in this mixing and incorporation. So we manually and mechanically incorporated into 2 different medias, well, same media, 2 different treatments, at the same rate. And then we planted half of each of those with or without plants. And then we leached the pots weekly, collected in these trays here, and recorded the electrical conductivity and the volume. And then we analyzed that water for ammonium and nitrate concentration. And with the nitrate and ammonium concentration and the volume, we can calculate the total amount of inorganic N that was leached. And we captured all the leachate from these over 76 days. So here's the results. And we have cumulative inorganic N leached on the y-axis, days after planting on the x-axis. And then we have my different treatments with mechanically mixed plus the plant, manually mixed, and manually mixed plus the plant. And so the first thing I'd like to show you is that in this first 5 to 7 weeks is when we actually, before that, we were seeing that the unplanted and planted had similar leaching rates. And then after that, the unplanted started to exceed the planted media. And so what that indicates is that there's little to no root establishment in that pot before that time. And so maybe we should, apply our nitrogen after this point, or apply a more significant amount of nitrogen after this point. And then another thing I'd like to point out is that our mechanically incorporated with the plant had 2.5 times more inorganic N leached compared to the manually incorporated. And so that's a lot of nitrogen. That means you could save 40% of your fertilizer by mixing this in manually, mixing the CRF in manually. However, I'm not going to advocate for anyone to do hand mixing or manually mixing of this fertilizer, because it's clearly not practical in our current labor climate, and it probably never will be. But maybe there's a gentler mixing method out there. This actually was from the equipment that we used for this experiment, and it fell, the CRF fell onto the hopper here, out of the hopper onto the conveyor belt. And then it actually went through to a 90-degree turn, which had rototillers like blades there that helped it move on to another conveyor belt, and it did that once more. And so maybe if we'd added it to that last conveyor belt, it wouldn't have gotten so damaged. So that's another thing. So one thing I'd like to just point out is try and add your controlled release fertilizer at the last possible point. And then one thing I'm working on right now is we're testing the durability of some different CRF coatings. And we kind of just started that, so we don't have any results yet. But that's all I got for 10 minutes. Here's a bunch of people who helped me, and funding sources: Horticultural Research Institute, Plant California Alliance, and then a couple CDFA grants. And thank you. And I'll take questions at the end, or at the allotted time.
Thank you, Bruno. There's a lot of information. We appreciate that update and that overview. All right, so next up, we have Joji Muramoto, who's a specialist in organic production with UC Agriculture and Natural Resources Division. And he's going to be talking about nitrogen management and organic agriculture systems. And he is joining us from Tokyo, Japan. It's tomorrow morning for him. So thank you very much, Joji. And if you're ready, we can go ahead and get you started about a minute early here.
Hey.
Thank you.
Can you see it?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, good morning. Oh, good afternoon, actually, everyone. My name is Joji Muramoto, Cooperative Extension Organic Production Specialist based at UC Santa Cruz. Today, I'm going to talk about the basics of nitrogen management in organic systems. First, let's talk about the nitrogen forms in soils and their plant availability, very basics to be on the same page. Soil nitrogen is grouped into organic nitrogen and inorganic nitrogen. And inorganic nitrogen in soil is mainly consists of ammonium nitrogen and nitrate nitrogen. Typically about 98% of total soil nitrogen is in organic form and 2% inorganic. Bad news is that 98% of organic nitrogen is not plant available, but only 2% of inorganic nitrogen is. But good news is a part of organic nitrogen can be turned into inorganic form, ammonium nitrogen, through the process called mineralization. It's an important word. And then to nitrate nitrogen through the process called nitrification. These two processes are biologically mediated, affected by environmental factors such as temperature and moisture. Majority of nitrogen in organic fertilizers is in organic form, and mineralization process is essential to make it plant available. Thus, nitrogen management in organic systems is inherently much more complex compared to conventional systems. Synchrony of nitrogen supply with nitrogen demand is a common sense concept, meaning matching nitrogen supply with crop nitrogen demand in terms of amount and timing. The figure here shows an example of asynchrony, providing a bit too much nitrogen too early relative to the crop nitrogen demand here. This makes front-loaded nitrogen supply susceptible to loss, this part. To accomplish nitrogen synchrony, first we need to know crops' nitrogen demand in terms of amount and timing. Here are examples of nitrogen uptake patterns of 3 different crops, summer broccoli, tomatoes, and strawberries. As you see, patterns are quite different, meaning nitrogen management strategy needs to be developed based on the target crop. The website by Daniel Geisler at UC Davis contains lots of data on different crops' nitrogen uptake patterns. Links are put in here. The next step is to supply nitrogen with organic fertilizers. Again, the majority of nitrogen in organic fertilizers is in organic form, which must go through mineralization process to make it plant available. This figure shows some examples of nitrogen mineralization rates of organic fertilizers. A given amount of each fertilizer was incorporated in the soil and incubated under the moist condition at a room temperature for 84 days. Y-axis shows the plant available nitrogen as % of total nitrogen of each fertilizer. For example, blood and feather meal, this dark purple here, starting here, had no plant available nitrogen to begin with, right here. But about 60% of total nitrogen in the fertilizers became plant available in 42 days. Goes from here to here. Guano, this one, has an exceptionally high 55% of plant available nitrogen to begin with. It's very unusual. An additional 30% became plant available in 42 days. On the other hand, composted yard trimmings at the base here did not mineralize at all during the incubation period. This figure suggests nitrogen mineralization rate is highly variable among organic fertilizers. Fortunately, there's a good indicator that can predict nitrogen mineralization of organic fertilizers. It is called carbon to nitrogen ratio, or C/N ratio. As you see here, the higher the CN ratio, the lower the nitrogen mineralization rate. And the lower the CN ratio, the higher the nitrogen mineralization rate. CN ratio is not shown on the product label, but in most cases, you can contact the manufacturer of the product and they can provide it. Or you can send sample to a commercial lab to get the data. As a case study, let's see what kind of strategy is necessary to accomplish the end synchrony in organic strawberries. This example uses feather meal 1.1 tons per acre as a pre-plant fertilizer to provide 165 pounds of nitrogen per acre of plant available nitrogen necessary to grow strawberries with 60,000 pounds per acre of marketable yield in the Central Coast. This is a strawberry nitrogen uptake curve, and this is a nitrogen release curve from the feather meal. The planting takes place in November, and to make it simple, here we assume pre-plant fertilizer is also applied in November. Yes, this approach can provide 165 pounds of nitrogen per acre per season needed for the strawberries for the whole entire season. But it does in really early in the season. Is it a good approach? Actually, this is not very good because we typically have rainy winters and plant available soil nitrogen, mainly nitrate, can be lost easily by storm events like this. Obviously, applying all nitrogen necessary for strawberries for the entire season at pre-plant is not a good strategy. To accomplish a better synchrony, pre-planting rate should be greatly reduced, and in-season application should be increased. Soil organic matter contains organic nitrogen. How much plant available nitrogen can be provided by soil organic matter's mineralization? This data from Daniel Geisler's presentation shows soil organic matter can provide some plant available nitrogen, especially in the summer when soil temperature is higher. But the amount is still limited and not sufficient to fulfill a crop's nitrogen demand of the entire season. This shows two scenarios, soil organic matter 1.5% and 3% in Central Coast. And during the summertime, at 1.5% is only provide 1.5 pounds of nitrogen per acre per week, and 3%, almost 3 pounds of nitrogen per week per acre per week. But plants usually requires 4 to 8 pounds per acre week for strawberries. So it helps, but not entirely helpful. So it's worth building soil organic matter, but it's not sufficient. In summary, variety of organic fertilizers and amendments are used in nitrogen management in organic systems. Organic nitrogen management is inherently complex because it involves biological processes such as mineralization that are influenced by environmental factors. Recent studies suggest that some microbes such as mycorrhizae and endophytes interact with plant roots and help a plant absorb nitrogen and other nutrients. More studies are necessary to use these biological interactions to increase nitrogen use efficiency in actual cropping systems. Lastly, I want to show you a very useful link on this topic. We had a comprehensive 3 half-day workshop on this exact topic in March, mainly targeting organic vegetables and strawberries in the Central Coast. It covered basics to frontiers on this issue, and videos and PowerPoints are available from the link here. If you are interested in this topic, I would highly encourage you to check this out. With that, thank you very much, and I'll be happy to answer questions, probably later.
Thank you, Joji. That was great. Really appreciate that overview. And if I can maybe get that last slide, I can add those links to our webinar.
I'm going to add it to the chat right now.
Session page. Oh, okay, thank you, Kelly. All right, so we'll have questions in just a few moments after Sonia's talk. I'd like to introduce Sonia Rios now. She's an area subtropical horticulture advisor for UCCE San Diego and Riverside counties, and she's going to talk to us about nitrogen management and orchard cropping systems. Sonia, thank you.
Do I have 10 minutes or 20 minutes? Do
10.
10. Oh man, okay.
10.
Okay, I'll start right away. Okay, so I'm gonna go fairly quickly on this. I'm sure these are gonna be posted somewhere else that you guys could see them, but I'm just gonna hit some of the main points here because I could literally talk about each one of these commodities with nitrogen for up to a couple of hours each. So we've heard all the bad stuff about what nitrogen can possibly do to hurt the environment, to hurt people, to do things like that. But let's talk about some of the beneficial things that it can actually do. And that is, one, create food. When we create food through nitrogen, there are many different properties that need to be involved, not just the nitrogen itself. And the level of nitrogen fertility has so much influence on how something grows. Of course, there's different factors as well. You know, there's the macronutrients, which nitrogen is a part of, and then micronutrients as well. Also, pH also has a lot to do on how nitrogen is absorbed into the actual plant itself. And then, of course, there's also always, almost all the time, there's nitrogen deficiency, especially when it comes to citrus. Citrus is one of those nitrogen-loving trees. And before we get started, I just want to really focus on whether you're working in grapes or whether you're working in citrus or the avocados. The main thing you have to know is the biology and phenology of the actual commodity you are working with. That is going to be able to tell you how much nitrogen to use and how to use it, and pretty much it can help you get the biggest yields, as well as protect the environment as well, because there's certain ways to apply it at certain times. So in general, for both of these commodities, there are different types of fertilizers that can be used, and then they all act differently within the environment. So nitrate is very mobile within the soil. So if you decide to use this type of method, just be very careful, because it can be leached into the root zone and can cause a lot of runoff. One thing about this is, for instance, you got to know your crop. So if you decide to do this in avocados, for example, they like really sandy soil. So if you try this method, guess what? You're most likely going to leach a majority of it out. Then there's urea, which is also relatively mobile, but it can generally be converted into ammonium. So you got to watch out for that as well. Ammonium itself is a little bit less mobile. This generally converts quickly to nitrate by soil microorganisms, especially in warm, moist soils, unless the water is saturated. In citrus, nitrogen uptake is generally lowest during its dormancy period, increased during flowering, and highest during the fruit set. For optimal growth and production, citrus about 2/3 of the annual nitrogen requirement should be supplied between early spring flush and fruit set. Like I said, you don't want to be applying it when the tree is actually flowering, because you can actually fry your flowers. So know your crop and know when to apply it. During spring flush and flowering, the nitrogen reserves from older tissues are mobilized and used for new leaves and flowers. The ability to mobilize nitrogen from permanent tissues and the canopy may be the reason why citrus trees do not respond to split nitrogen applications, unlike the younger trees, which actually do benefit when you do split it into 4 to 6 applications from late February through August. Alternatively, slow release fertilizers can be used on younger trees, and fertilizer applications in the fall may reduce cold hardiness as well. So there are some pros and cons about using it correctly. Applying some of the nitrogen with foliar sprays and the rest by fertigation has been found to be very effective. So also you can try multiple ways of applying nitrogen. That can also be an option for growers as well. The most popular, I would have to say, is the fertigation system, which is basically the fertilizer goes through the water system, and the tree gets its nitrogen directly to the root line. And also the fertilizer should be injected into the system in the middle third of the irrigation set. So for example, if you're watering for 18-20 hours per set, fertilizer is injected from 6 through hour 12. This prevents urea and nitrate from moving below the root zone, which you don't want it to go because then it'll start leaching, but it still ensures that the nitrogen is distributed well in the wetting zone and does not remain within the irrigation system, because it can also build up as calcium nitrate and actually plug up your systems. So you always want to make sure that if you are doing fertigation, to make sure that your lines are always clean. For citrus, there's also liquid ammonia that can be used. However, that tends to increase the water pH. So if you have a highly acidic pH, or it's pretty borderline, just be careful when you use liquid ammonia, because it always tends to make it a little bit more higher. Then we have granular fertilizers. This is also quite popular with citrus growers. However, it can be lost to volatilization when it's applied to the surface. Let's say it does get semi-wet or only gets a little bit wet. There's a breeze, there's heat. You could actually pollute the earth a little bit this way. So you must be very careful and make sure you incorporate it correctly. And for the avocados, nitrogen is recommended based on some studies that were done. Each tree needs about 1 to 2 pounds, which corresponds to 145 to 290 pounds of nitrogen per acre in a 145 tree acre orchard. As you can see here to the table to the right, you can actually see that when you expect yields from 3,000 to 18,000, it only goes up by 50%, but yet the yield jumps up dramatically. So you can actually get away with what they call spoon feeding nitrogen to these type of trees. And this can actually greaten your yield quite a bit. However, when it comes to harvesting, it's kind of like a give and take. So for instance, if you had a really heavy yield, then guess what? The next year you're gonna have to put on a lot more nitrogen, because it used that nitrogen that you gave it the previous year to create that fruit. But you got to be careful, because with the avocados, they have an alternate bearing habit. So if you can see here, one year it's an on year, so you'll have higher yield. Then you'll have an off year, lower yield, and then you'll have a high yield, and then once again go back to low. So you have to make sure what on or off period your grove is in, because that's also going to determine how much nitrogen you do apply. You don't want to apply a large amount you did like the previous year if you're going to have an off year. You could really damage your crop that way. And then I'm not really going to go into this model for the sake of time, but when young trees are usually fertilized, they are fertilized once every 4 to 6 weeks through the growing period, through March through October. They can be given dry or liquid fertilizers, and we highly always suggest to use mulch, just for the fact that it traps in water and prevents weed growth most of the time. However, always want to know where your mulch comes from, because sometimes it can initially tie up some of the nitrogen, and to compensate for this, it can actually be bad for it. But in the long run, in general, mulching is excellent for these type of trees. And you also want to check the water as well. I want to make sure where your water source is coming from. And then when it comes to foliar nitrogen, mature leaves are insufficient at taking up the urea because of their thick, waxy cuticle. So I would not suggest trying to put on a foliar onto the avocado trees because of the way that their leaves are. And also there was a study done by Lovett. I'm actually not going to go there, but there is a time and place where you can apply to large trees. let me see here. Not going to go into that too much. And since high nitrogen trees are less likely at risk for freeze damage, a spray of 2% urea prior to the anticipation of freeze may be useful. So just because they say, oh, well, you know, to apply nitrogen when the plant needs it the most, maybe you shouldn't do the foliar. However, it does have some benefits, and if it's already up to date with its nitrogen amount that it needs, you can get away with actually spraying it and it'll still be beneficial because it'll help with the freeze. It'll help protect those leaves. This is a calculator that Carol Lovett, and this one was actually created by Ruben Hofschi and his son, and it's a calculator. And it basically can tell you, based on your volume of the previous year, how much of each of the macro and micronutrients that your crop needs. So this is an excellent tool. Highly suggest that people use it. Like I said, this will be posted, so hopefully you guys can take a crack at it and see what you guys can come out with. And then, like I said, the well water, especially coming from San Diego, we're having such problems with water. There's less of it. It's less quality. It's has a high pH. It really has a lot of salts in it. So you should really test out your well water at least once a year. I would highly suggest doing that. You want to make sure that there are no surprises, because the lower the water comes from, the less quality it actually is. And with the avocado tree, there's such finicky trees that anything can throw them off and anything can kill them and anything can kill their leaves. So it's very careful. So it's very important that just a few for that. Fertigation is actually the preferred method for the avocados, and granular fertilizers are also. But however, the only problem with these is that they have to be incorporated. I'm sure if you guys know the avocado trees in San Diego, they are on hills. The topography is not very nice to tractors and equipment, so that can be a little bit of an issue. So incorporating is usually a problem for that. Ammonium sulfate is a strong acidifier. It is not used when the avocados are grown on acidic soils. Like I said, you have to know your soils. You have to know exactly what's going on, such as those found on the hillsides in San Diego County. Calcium nitrate, which neutralizes acidity, is a good choice for these soils. Triple 15, which is 15, 15, 15. As you guys know, it's NPK. Ammonium nitrate and urea are commonly used as granular fertilizers if you do want to go that route. And then there's certain times. When do you actually apply it? A traditional recommendation is that nitrogen be fertigated once a month in equal doses over the course of the growing season. This reduces the risk of nitrate leaching into the groundwater. Remember that list of bad things that that were mentioned before? Yes, it is possible. It can cause many things to go wrong and can hurt a lot of people. The avocado trees take up most of their nutrients between full bloom and autumn and during the following spring. And of course, we all know that very little nitrogen is taken up during the winter because the plant is in dormant time. So it's not really using any type of energy. On your trees take up more nitrogen than the off your trees. Remember, I was talking about that. You guys saw the ups and downs and ups and downs. You want to be careful when you do apply. I'm not going to go too much into that. But here are just some special considerations, because remember I said these trees are so finicky. In order to avoid winter flushing, which can cause frost damage, Ben Faber, my counterpartner from Ventura, he recommends that along the coast in Southern California that no nitrogen be applied between October 1st and March 1st because of the new flush. Usually in Southern California, we're a little bit warmer, so you could probably even extend that just by a little bit. Extra nitrogen in April may help reduce alternate bearing. This has not been 100% proven yet, but they are probably suggesting that it may be able to help, but not completely turn it around and not give you that bearing, that type of bearing. When the tree has set a heavy crop, an extra nitrogen application in August can help protect the fruit from sunburn by stimulating new vegetative growth. Once a tree gets sunburned, it can actually start declining and get it weak, have phytophthora come into it, and then you have a downward spiral. So if you know you're going to have a heavy load, or you're noticing it's going to have a heavy load, that's something. This is especially a good idea on trees that are affected by perseamite, which is a huge problem down in Southern California, especially by Duluth, Fallbrook area, and this can cause leaf drop. And then trees that have been damaged by fire or frost, fire seems to be the new thing that's happening now, especially down in the Ventura area. They shouldn't be fertilized until new growth has begun to push out, which can be 3 to 6 months after the initial damage has happened. Okay. Any questions? Well, I guess we're going to wait for questions, right?
Jan, we do not hear you. There's no sound coming.
Hi, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Sonia. Hope you can catch your breath now. I know you went through that really fast. Thank you for that great overview. A lot of great information. I did want to point out, I typed it in the chat box, but I did want to let everybody know we are recording all of our sessions this week, all of our webinars, and those recordings will be available probably within 2 weeks after this week. And we will inform you when those are up and ready for you to access. For Jason, who got cut out due to the thunderstorm, I will contact him and see if there's a way we can get another presentation from him somehow or share his PowerPoint with you. So we'll keep you informed on how we might get you some more information from Jason. So right now, if anybody has any questions, I'd like to ask all of the speakers, Sonia and Joji and Bruno, if they can pop back on with their cameras. And if anybody has any questions, just type them in the chat box or raise your hand and we'll turn on your, we'll unmute you. Is there any questions at all? It was a lot, I felt it was a lot of information covered very quickly.
I have a question.
Looks like Jerry has a question.
Okay, Jerry?
Well, I don't know, maybe it was more a question for Jason, but maybe Bruno and Joji can tell us what's their take. I guess the question is on nurseries, how are they gonna apply these applied minus removed? Maybe Daniel Geisler has some coefficients that says for this many tons of I don't know, apples or I don't know, cucumbers, there are this many pounds of nitrogen in there. So that's how, if you're a grower, that's how you're supposed to calculate this removed quantity. But how are they gonna do that for how are they gonna ask growers to do that for nurseries?
Yeah, so I think that's, one of the major issues that came about originally in the first nitrogen management plan. And so that's, what really initiated the work that I was doing. And I don't know, I'm not even sure. So unfortunately, I haven't kept up on the irrigation nitrogen management plans that are I guess we call it the next generation. And so I'm not exactly sure how they're handling it in the Central Valley Regional Water Quality Control Board. I think what they were doing previously was you would fill it out and there'd be, a big gap in the amount of nitrogen that we, knew was where it was going. And then they just had the growers write nursery crop on it, and then they put it into a different file. So I don't know. Yeah, unfortunately, I don't have an answer. I think Jason would probably be the person to talk to.
Okay, thank you. There's a question for Sonia. What types of organic nitrogen, this is from Joel Kramer with Resource Conservation District. What types of organic nitrogen sources can you recommend for avocados in San Diego? And have you seen cover crops implemented successfully on young grows?
Okay, so for organic, the most popular that I've seen growers use in San Diego is fish emulism, I believe that's what it's called. I don't know if that's fish. I believe that's fish poop is what is most commonly used for organic that I've seen growers use. A majority of them do use that. And then for crops, for cover crops, yes, they have, but I have not seen it take off or be very successful in San Diego, just for the fact that the cost of water, you also have to water your trees, and you also have to take care of that cover crop. Yes, eventually the cover crop will actually help with maintaining water moisture, but at the same time, you still need that water to have it take off. And I've seen it a lot in Ventura. It's really taken off in Ventura, but not so much in San Diego County, but it is possible. And no, we do not have a type of actual type of seeds that you can use. That's still in testing phase. Ben Faber has been doing some work in that. But as of right now, we don't have like, you use X amount of these seeds and X amount of this type of seeds, because there's just so many out there that it's really hard to pinpoint which ones will actually work.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Sonia. Here's another question. Sonia, I'm not well researched with this issue, but I've heard there is more of a chance of contributing excess phosphorus with use of organic nitrogen fertilizer. Have you seen this issue?
I have not seen the issue. I've heard of it because there's something to have to do with the type of soil that you have, because sometimes the nitrogen can get tied up if there's too much phosphorus. But I can't answer that question right now, but I know it has to do something with the with the soil chemistry and what type of soil that you do have, because some gets tied up when it's too acidic or too alkaline, as well as what type of sandy soil. Oh, I can't think of any type of soils right now, but yeah, it has to do with the soil chemistry. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So
thank you. And George.
Yeah.
Go ahead, George.
Okay. Yeah. Also, soil chemistry for sure, and also the NP ratio of the organic amendment itself, mm-hmm. Especially animal manure-based material has more phosphorus than others. So, and then more than the plants need. So it tends to accumulate phosphorus in the soil. If the grower trying to use animal manure-based compost or something and to feed nitrogen to the crop, excess phosphorus can accumulate in the soil. But the recent study suggests that, surveyed different organic farms soil and see if that's the case for organic fields. But in California, they haven't seems to find it. It's not necessarily the case in the California organic systems. Some heavily dairy-based fertility management systems may have higher available phosphorus than other regions. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Okay, great. Thank you for sharing. Also, I wanted to just jump back to the previous question that Sonia answered, and an organic nitrogen source, fish emulsion. Joji had put that in the chat box. If you hadn't seen it, was the a source used in San Diego.
For organic, yeah.
I think is what. Yep.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? No, I really want to thank all of our presenters today. It was a lot of information, like I said, and we had short time frames to provide you with overviews, all these different growing systems. You know, San Diego agriculture is so unique. We can grow so many different crops here that we wanted to try and address several of them today. So again, thank you to all of our presenters. If you have further questions, you can go ahead and continue to put them in the chat box. And if our presenters need to leave the meeting, we can make sure that we get those to them at a later time and get those answered to you. So next, in previous years' symposiums, one of the comments that we got a lot was that people were interested in having more time reserved for Q&A, for discussion, times to discuss, and kick around just have some discussions, open discussions. So both today when we were talking about water quality and nitrogen management, and tomorrow we'll be talking about pest management, we wanted to, since those are activities for most growers to contend with, we wanted to make sure that we reserve some of this time for discussion on these 2 days. So we're going to have breakout groups. They're going to be small groups. We've got several facilitators, people who've agreed to be facilitators. It's, let me see, go through their names, introduce you real quick. They will be assigned a group. There's Annika Neighbors, Esther Mosase, Kristen Salgado, Chandra Richards, Sonia Rios, Jerry Spinelli, and myself. And we'll be assigned to a group, and everybody else will be assigned, I think just however, like randomly. And then we'll get a 5-minute update as to when it's time to come back into this main room. And during these breakout discussions, if you can focus your discussions on the challenges and issues, as I mentioned earlier, the challenges and issues that you see with water quality and with nitrogen management. And we'll collect the responses and the key points that are brought up in each of the groups, and those points will be made available in a post-symposium report that we provide. Okay, so let's see how this goes, and I hope everybody has a great discussion. Okay, so thank you. It looks like our group dropped to about half, but I hope there were some good questions and discussion in your small groups. I'll just once again ask all the facilitators if you could just send me a quick email with what are some of the main questions that you heard or points that were discussed. I'd really appreciate that. Again, I wanted to thank all of those, the presenters were here. We'll get back in touch with Jason, our first presenter, who we lost partway through, and see if we might be able to get his presentation to all the participants today in some way, shape, or form. Everything is being recorded today, so, well, not that the breakout groups, I didn't know that if I mentioned that before, but we'll have those videos uploaded and the links to you as soon as possible, probably within 2 weeks. So there's the continuing education unit information is there on the screen. Kelly's got that.
Yeah, again, just you can use the QR code. You can just take a picture and scan for the certified crop advisor, and we'll automatically submit on your behalf for San Diego Region Irrigated Lands Group. That's it. That's all I had.
Okay. Well, Kelly and Quinn, I want to thank you again for your help. I appreciate and thank everybody for being here and joining us. Hopefully you can join us for the next 2 sessions. Tomorrow will be the same time, and Friday will be in the morning. And we've got lots of more information coming up. So we'll say goodbye and thank you again.